In 1990, the NES catalog welcomed a game adaptation of A Nightmare on Elm Street, developed by Rare and published by LJN. Rare, a British studio known for their impressive NES output including Battletoads, took on the challenge of adapting Wes Craven's iconic horror franchise. They approached the game with a unique blend of platforming, cooperative play, and light horror elements, setting it apart from typical NES offerings. While the game is memorable for its ambitious ideas, it brings a mix of successes and flaws that impact its lasting appeal. The game's premise takes players on a quest to collect Freddy Krueger's bones, which are scattered across Elm Street, allowing them to finally put an end to his terror. Players can choose between going solo or teaming up with friends, as the game supports up to 4 players through the NES 4-score or satellite accessory. This multiplayer feature is a unique strength, transforming the gameplay into a social experience that captures the spirit of 1980s horror movies, where friends work together to face unspeakable dangers. One of the game's standout features is its cooperative mode, which allows up to 4 players to join in the fight against Freddy. This multiplayer option is rare among NES titles, providing a fun, shared experience that elevates the gameplay beyond that of a typical platformer. The co-op mode is especially beneficial for the game's atmosphere, making it easier to overlook some of the game's more challenging aspects when players can strategize together and enjoy the tension as a team. Few NES games offered such a feature, and this distinction makes A Nightmare on Elm Street one of the more engaging titles to play with friends. Rare's technical expertise is apparent in the game's graphics and audio, which do an admirable job of creating a tense atmosphere. The moody color palette and well-crafted sprites bring out a shadowy, unsettling world that enhances the horror theme. The game's soundtrack also contributes to the eerie vibe, using haunting tones to add tension as players explore Freddy's dreamlike landscape. For an 8-bit horror experience, Rare managed to push the visual and auditory boundaries of the NES, effectively crafting a dark atmosphere that enhances the immersion. A creative mechanic introduced by the game is its dream world concept, in which players occasionally shift into a more difficult dream version of each level. During these dream sequences, enemies are tougher, and new challenges arise. However, players are also granted a unique edge, as they can transform into different dream warrior forms, such as a javelin thrower or a wizard. These transformations add welcome variety to the gameplay, allowing players to strategize and change their approach based on each warrior's unique abilities. The dream world concept adds a layer of depth and strategy to the experience, giving players a taste of empowerment within an otherwise nightmarish setting. Despite these ambitious ideas, A Nightmare on Elm Street falls short in several areas that may affect its appeal, especially for solo players. For one, the gameplay becomes repetitive, as each level requires players to collect Freddy's bones to advance. While the dream transformations and varied environments aim to counteract this, the core gameplay loop, scouring levels for bones, can feel monotonous. This repetitiveness becomes more evident as the game progresses, causing the novelty of the dream mechanics to wear off. The controls and hit detection further hinder the experience. Players often find the controls sluggish, especially when jumping or fighting enemies, which can make certain sections of the game unnecessarily difficult. Hit detection issues also add frustration, as enemies can sometimes land attacks before they're fully visible, leading to unfair damage that's difficult to avoid. This issue is compounded during the dream sequences, where enemies grow stronger and more aggressive, making these sections a test of endurance and patience. For a game based on a horror movie, A Nightmare on Elm Street is surprisingly light on scare elements. While the soundtrack and visuals provide a suitable atmosphere, the game lacks genuine horror moments. Freddy himself only appears sporadically and is less menacing than one might expect, often reduced to a minor obstacle rather than an intimidating presence. Fans of the films may find this disappointing, as the game doesn't fully capture the terror that defined Freddy Krueger in the movies. Ultimately, A Nightmare on Elm Street is a distinctive entry in the NES library, showcasing Rare's willingness to experiment with new mechanics and multiplayer options. The cooperative gameplay, dream-world sequences, and atmospheric design make it worth experiencing, particularly for those interested in retro horror games. However, the game's repetitive structure, challenging controls, and limited scare factor may not appeal to everyone, especially solo players looking for a more robust horror experience. In conclusion, A Nightmare on Elm Street is best enjoyed with friends, where its unique elements can be appreciated despite its flaws. Rare's bold take on horror may not fully capture the essence of the franchise, but it stands as an interesting attempt to bring cinematic horror to an 8-bit console.